Very good. Well, welcome to Multicloud Security Best Practices. I think we're best friends now.
I think we just became best friends.
This is Luis. I'm Jeff Sweet. I'm a security specialist here at AWS. I've been here about 6 years, a little over 6 years, and I have many loves in life, but one of my very biggest loves is tacos.
My name is Luis Pastor. I'm in Jeff's team, as you can see. I've been here for 3.5 years, and love is never a competition. But if it was, I love tacos more than Jeff. And we're taking recommendations, so at the end of this talk, if you have a good recommendation for a taco in town, let us know. We'll be over there.
Yeah, and because this is a silent session, we won't get the chance to do active question and answer during the talk, but Luis and I will be out back here afterwards, so if something comes up you want to ask us, please come back. We'd love to chat with you. So, our session today, we're going to talk about some of the challenges that goes on with multi-cloud security strategies specifically. We're going to talk about some common challenges like how and where to federate, how to manage your data protection and privacy, how to gain some visibility around what's going on in your multi-cloud architecture. What does it mean to scale your teams or tools to help you in that endeavor? And what are some next steps and some resources that are available to you? I'm happy to tell you that none of us, Luis and I, are not here to talk you out of multi-cloud, but we're definitely here to help. So multi-cloud security strategy.
So we love definitions. So let's start with the definition. So at AWS, we're defining multi-cloud as an organization that operates in 2 or more cloud service providers, right? That means you have IT solutions or workloads in 2 or more cloud service providers. Is there anybody here that's already operating in this way? Yeah, and a lot of us already are there. So we really want to make sure that you have the freedom to operate wherever you can do that more efficiently. And like Jeff said, we're here to help. If you're interested in security, we have this talk. There's other conversations in the session going around: FinOps, observability, developer experience, and we are going to be in the multi-cloud booth. So come and say hi. Well, we'll also show you how we created the picture in the beginning if you want. No AI, only Photoshop. So many of you already multi-cloud, so you already know. Most organizations don't just wake up one day and decide, I'm going to deploy in a different cloud, right? A lot of us have different business drivers that are going to push us to go that way. We have some examples here. They're not all of the different drivers that may push you, but these are some of the ones we see constantly through our conversation with our customers. The first one is going to be mergers and acquisitions. This is where your organization acquires another one, and they may be operating in another cloud. So now you're a multi-cloud organization. Like if you operate a taco place and you buy a quesadilla place, now you're operating both, right? So you have to understand both considerations. Differentiated capabilities. Maybe you have a workload that has specific business requirements, and then you are going to deploy that workload in another cloud that may have better fit your needs. So you're going to become multi-cloud. Regulatory requirements, right? This is more to do with security and compliance. Think about things like data sovereignty. Maybe you have to deploy in one place. That's a geolocation, and that drives your decision to go with one cloud or another one. And then, of course, independent software vendors. Maybe you start working with an ISV, and that ISV is operating in another cloud. Maybe your share of the responsibility model, your controls that you're responsible for are lower on that use case, but you still have to understand how they're addressing your security concerns. So I think the takeaway from this slide is that it doesn't matter what the driver is. The constant here is going to be governance, security, and compliance, right? That's going to have to be extended throughout your multi-cloud estate so that you have the mechanisms in place to protect the data that you're using, the systems that you're using. So we'll go through that journey now. Let's talk about some of the questions that you may want to ask yourself. You may already be there, but it's maybe a good thing to start thinking through some of these considerations to understand the challenges that you went through and maybe come up. And we have more than this, so please talk to us after this talk. We can have longer conversations, but one of them is going to be, how do your security operations look like now, right? Do you have a good understanding of your current state? Do you understand where your controls are and how they're protecting your data, your systems? Do you have the capability to extend those security controls to a multi-cloud environment? Here we're talking more about people and process. So do you have the mechanisms in place to extend those processes to a multi-cloud environment? Are you ready to move to another CSP and expand your estate to a multi-cloud? Another one is going to be, who will own your security response and monitoring capabilities, right? A lot of organizations have that distributed. A lot of organizations centralize those capabilities. So what are you going to do? What's your decision going to be? And what considerations are going to drive that decision? This is true for other security capabilities, but in our opinion, most important for security response, because timing is going to be of the essence when you're responding to an event. And then monitoring, because visibility is going to be so much more important in a multi-cloud environment, right? It's already important when you have one cloud. It's going to be more important when you have different clouds. When you talk about 2 or 3, even more important, right? Another question you may ask yourself is, what tools do you already have that are multi-cloud? A lot of our customers focus on tooling, and this is an important consideration. But the good news here is that a lot of the tools that you may already be using, they're already multi-cloud. So you can start extending those. And if you have expertise, if your teams already know how to use them, how to deploy them, it's a lot easier to deploy them to a multi-cloud environment. You get those benefits right away. Another one of the questions is going to be, what are the divisions for things like SecOps, AppSec, governance, auditing, security? So all those teams are going to have to communicate, coordinate, and if they're doing it in one cloud, it's going to add a lot of complexity to do it in 2 or 3. So how do you think through, how do you best manage your teams and the tools they need to drive those security requirements throughout the multi-cloud estate? And finally, but even maybe most important, how do you enforce data governance? Do you know where your data lives now? Do you have good data flows? Do you have good diagramming that tells you where your data is, how it's being processed, how it's being transmitted, where is it stored? Because it's going to get more complex in a multi-cloud environment, and you really want to understand where your data lives so that you can apply those security mechanisms where that sensitive data is so you can protect it, right? So these are some of the considerations and challenges. Let's start addressing some of those. And one of the things we recommend here is start by using a multi-cloud security framework, right? Here we have NIST CSF, so the NIST Cybersecurity Framework as an example. It doesn't have to be this one. Pick whatever fits your needs, right? Whatever you may already be using, or even an integrated. But what the point we're driving here is going to be, pick a high-level, cloud-agnostic, cloud-neutral framework that can drive your posture forward, right? So focus on those outcomes, not recommendation. We'll talk more about what that means in a little bit. But the multi-cloud security framework is going to help you in a couple of different ways. So we talked about measurability, right? It's going to help you understand where you're at, and it's going to use that cloud neutral language to evaluate your entire state across the clouds to understand where you're going. So when you have a good security baseline that is comprised of those cloud agnostic controls, it gives you something you can plan for, budget, and measure against. The second thing it's going to provide you is the ability to communicate more effectively within the teams, right? You have that cloud agnostic framework that you can use to communicate. We need this requirement or this control to be implemented throughout our estate. It really doesn't matter how it's implemented. It matters that it's implemented and we know that it's in place and it's doing it effectively, right? Technologies may change, but the outcome should be the same. So let's put it all together. Security doesn't care where your data is, and it doesn't care where your workloads live.
I got an idea. You know, our supersonic drone taco delivery program. My uncle Elroy's got a cloud provider. He runs a cloud provider.
Really?
Yeah, man, it's in his basement.
Does it comply with all the security frameworks?
No.
Then no, we cannot use that.
Whatever.
So here we really want a cloud service provider that is adhering to a lot of the compliance frameworks. Once you have established which one of those requirements you would have to align to, from that compliance frameworks, you can drive that operational excellence. So again, you really don't have to focus on what are the specific mechanisms in place to drive those controls, but that the controls are in place and are acting efficiently. And so it's outcomes, not implementation.
So outcomes versus implementation is something that we start to see customers become challenged with when their growth starts to expand into other clouds. Because we want to have policies that define our control and control objectives, right? And we want our development teams to turn around and be able to implement those effectively. And one of the challenges is that if you are kind of a small, not even a small company, if you're a company that's just operating on a single cloud provider, or maybe you are a company migrating into cloud from on-prem, you might end up with security teams that have defined security policies that include implementation, right? So here's a good example of something like that. We've told our development teams for data that is classified as internal, right? We want you to store it on S3 with some given KMS encryption policy. And for our development teams that are operating in AWS, this makes perfect sense. We can deploy it, it's easy. But what happens to our teams that need to take that security policy and go to another cloud provider like Azure or GCP? We now have created confusion. And in that confusion, you're going to begin overwhelming security teams because your development teams are going to consistently keep coming back and going, well, wait a minute, what do you mean? Is this going to be okay? Is this okay? So instead, we want to look at security policies that still achieve our security outcomes, right? Here with just a few small tweaks to the policy, we've now said internal data when stored in cloud must be stored in an object storage with the following types of encryption, right? If you look back a few years ago, Steven Schmidt, he spoke on the top 10 things to be doing in your AWS, and one of the things he talked about was like implicit policies, right? Policies that are easy to follow and easy to understand. And this is where we've come to. So now we have a policy that achieves our outcomes, can be applied anywhere, including on-prem. And then out of that, we can begin creating implementation guidelines. And in fact, those implementation guidelines might come out of those very same development teams who then say, here's how we did it, and we were approved by security. So let's talk about common challenges. A lot of what goes into this list, it comes out of Luis and I and other folks, our conversations with customers. If you have got a challenge that is not on this list, I would love to talk to you after this. I'd love to hear your voice and understand what you're up against, but we grouped these into the categories mapped to the CSF. So in Protect starts with identity management. You've got a bunch of places where your developers have been approved to run their workloads. How do you identify how do they get there? How do they authenticate? What does your auth-in, auth-z mechanisms look like? Again, in the protect category is data security, right? There's going to be a lot of data. How do we manage it? In detect is continuous monitoring. You now have a lot of architecture. You need to have visibility into what's going on around it. And in the respond category is incident management. We need to be able to do something when something occurs, be it a security event, be it a misconfiguration event, be it simply something that needs to be cleaned up because our policies and constraints have changed. So when we look at this, how and where to federate, how do we get our users authenticated, really comes down a lot to centralized federation. I need to know who is who. When it comes to encryption and privacy, we really are looking at a lot of automation. And we'll talk more in depth about each of these, but I need to control my data. When we talk about visibility, visibility really is going to become centralizing that event and log data because I need to see what's going on. And team skills and tools. This one is going to be maybe a little bit of the more complex conversation, but I need to look into specialized tools or specialized teams because I need expert people. I need expert resources that can help me manage all of the above. And so, centralized federation, as we talk about this and we get into each of these categories a little deeper, this is a kind of a single source of truth. We'll talk about what those sources can look like, but essentially we need to be able to make sure that all of our cloud providers and our on-prem resources are going back to a single source of truth. Automation can mean monitoring configuration, right? Actively responding with remediation around our data and using cloud guardrails and configuring them automatically. Centralized data is, it's centralized logging. It's pretty simple. How we do that, there's a lot of different approaches, right? And specialized teams and tools, again, we'll get into this, but essentially you might think about specialized sub-teams as part of your Cloud Center of Excellence, or you might be looking at tools to extend into the different cloud providers that you are operating with. But let's start with identity and access management.
I think technically we call these who's who.
Yeah, the who's who.
Who's who. Okay, let's start with identity and access management. Again, the good news here is that we're tackling the challenge that we already know and understand, right? Authentication, who am I? User, system, machine, agent when it comes to agentic AI, right? Authorization, what am I allowed to do? What are the permissions do I have? And of course, accounting, right? Tracking, what do I have access to? What, in terms of data or in terms of resources, do I have access to? And I know a lot of you said that you're already operating multi-cloud. Who has already established a centralized federation here? A few of you. This is one of the first things we see some organizations do when they go multi-cloud, right? Because you want to have that control in one single place. And probably you're going to use things like Microsoft Active Directory, open source LDAP, Ping, Okta, something like that to give you one source of truth where you can control your identity, right? Where you have a better idea of who's accessing your systems, what those permissions are to access the systems and the data, and keep track in case that you have to investigate or do some forensic analysis later. So one of the first challenges that comes up, one of the first ones that we see our customers tackle, the recommended pattern for this, in our opinion, is going to be that single source of truth for federated access for multi-cloud resources. So have that one place where you manage all the identities on all the access in your multi-cloud state. This is going to be enabled by a third-party federation provider, providing that identity source that you need federation to work with. So once you have this established, it's going to give you two very powerful benefits. First one is that single point of identity and access management, right? Your team just to have to focus on one place to understand your estate, who is who, and what access they have. And also, it enables to maybe put some higher controls and standards in place, right? For example, it might be more palatable to users to deploy things like multi-factor authentication and complex passwords because it's just one place where they have to log on, right? Your users are going to be much happier. They're going to have one place where they can log in, and they're not going to have to log into disparate dashboards, disparate systems to go through their day-on operations. So it's going to be much easier for them. And again, they might be more accepting of tougher security controls when it comes to users that might be privileged, right? Higher privileged users. So really great benefits coming from this. The trade-offs are going to be, in my opinion, the first one is more of an investment than a trade-off, right? You're going to have to spend some time and effort in the beginning, setting everything up. Is going to be more complex the more clouds you use, and it's going to be exponential if you have operating systems, applications, portals, right? It's going to create that level of complexity is going to add up, but it's going to pay dividends at the end of the day. It's going to save you time from operational overhead, managing all those different places where your users may live, and it's also going to be a lot easier for those users. And the last three are going to be related. It's going to, the reliance on a third party is going to create that dependency risk. So you have to have really tight break glass procedures so you can respond when there's an outage, right? So you're going to have to be very clear on how you're going to operate if something breaks, because there's that one place where everybody is logging on and where all the administration is going to happen. So again, it's going to be a lot easier to sign on, and we're going to be able to avoid things like identity sprawl, operational overhead. So it's going to be a lot easier to establish your identity and management once you centralize. So now that you have an understanding of who's logging onto your system, let's see how to protect your data.
So I think anybody that is operating sort of on one cloud probably starts to understand that when data is all in one place, it's a lot easier and more straightforward to control that data because you can use consistent guardrails and controls within that cloud provider. The challenge that becomes in a multi-cloud environment is that data begins to sprawl, right? And we've got source code, right, that has been deployed maybe as part of a workload. Maybe we're doing development in virtual instances. We have a ton of logs, and those logs might contain sensitive information. They might have their own data classification. And we've got just simply data, the data that our workloads work on. And that can be anything from PII, health, HPI, yeah, there we go. I was getting there. And again, what do we do about that data? How do we understand it? Well, we have policies that are driving that, right? So we have a data classification, whatever that works for you, but you really should have a data classification. And if you don't, you should go home and really think about having a data classification, because that begins to define things like data access. Who can access that data? Through what mechanisms can they access it? How is that data encrypted? Do we need to apply a multi-level approach to our encryption? Is it just, your kids' love letters to their girlfriend, and we can just rot 13 it? Who knows what rot 13 is? Woo, I'm dating myself. Okay, so, and what does the life cycle look like? Data gets left out all the time, right? We've seen a number of security events over the years that have occurred because data gets put in a place without the proper controls around it and forgotten about, only to be later discovered by someone that we didn't want to discover it. So this is why we need to have these controls, classifications, and access policies. So how do we go about doing that? Because it seems very daunting to think about, you have development teams ingesting data, producing data. How do we get a hold of it? The first place we want to kind of start is data security posture management as an option. Is anybody running a DSPM tooling now? Okay, couple of people. This is a very new space. A number of really great partner companies with AWS have great product offerings around this. They're here in the village. Make sure you go check them out, because data security posture management can really give you the tooling you need to go understand how your data exists, right? And that way you can start questioning, like, where do I need to go make changes? Are my policies actually as effective as they need to be? Things like that. Cloud native guardrails. You should always question what cloud providers offer you in terms of protecting your data, right? Obviously, I'd love to tell you all about AWS's, from encryption to Macy and tracking, finding your data, and stuff like that. But really, you should be looking at those guardrails and leveraging them where possible, and then questioning automation. How can I pull automation in to do things like monitoring that data ingestion, monitoring data migration, monitoring how data is being protected and managed? Because then you can turn around and assure compliance for that data, right? If you're under a compliance framework that requires you to protect that data because of its sensitive nature, you're probably already operating in this space to assure that your data is configured correctly. And remediation. If you go plug in something like one of our DSPM partner tools, you're probably going to need to find a lot of stuff that maybe needs remediation. And the cool thing is, when we talk about automation nowadays, even just a year or two ago, I knew security teams that would break out in cold sweats when you told them that they needed to write their own code to do some of this automation. But nowadays, with agentic AI and vibe coding, this is so much more approachable by teams because this code can now get created by literally anybody that can write an effective prompt. Find your prompt engineering talk this week at reInvent. So, what are the benefits out of this? Well, DSPM is really streamlining efforts in this space. And that's great. That means that it's one less thing that security teams need to worry about, because tooling is emerging in this space to really get a hold of how your data is protected and what controls are in place around it. And automation adds efficiencies, right? The story around automation has always been the same. Automation adds virtual people to your team, right? One of my past roles, we were a very small security team of like 4 or 5 people. operating on thousands of AWS accounts. So embracing automation is really a very powerful thing for any security team. There's some challenges around this though, and you're going to hear some of these kind of repeatedly through this talk. Cost, right? Tooling comes with a cost to purchase. Might come with a cost to bring in professional services from that tooling company to help get the most out of the tool the fastest. So there's budgetary questions that you kind of have to have. While I just said that creating automation has gotten easier, there is still a complexity to it. Deploying it, making sure that your automation is reaching all the places that it needs to, all the nooks and crannies that to discover data and work on any type of remediation, things like that, especially as you become more and more distributed. And guardrails. While the cloud-native guardrails may be great, you should be evaluating them against your security policies to question if there's gaps. And when there are gaps, you should be looking at one of these other options to fill that in, making sure that you meet the objectives of your security policies. So, Luis, tell us about centralized logging.
Or what's going on. So let's talk about visibility, because you can't secure what you can't see, right? And this is one of other topics that sound really easy, right? Just centralize your visibility and you'll be fine. But putting this in place is more complex than it sounds. Again, the complexity adds up exponentially, because we're not just talking about logs from one cloud, adding another cloud, but each cloud is going to have a tech stack, right? So you're going to be adding logs from your operating system, from your database, from your applications, right? So it's an exponential level of logs that you have to ingest, consume, analyze, and add that to the data protection mechanisms that Jeff mentioned that need to be in place to protect those logs. It starts to get complicated really quickly. Still, our recommendation is to centralize those logs, but we'll talk through some of the considerations, right? So at the high level, centralizing those logs will give you the visibility you need, right? So one place to see everything in your multi-cloud environment is the way to go. This is going to be, again, easier said than done. But if you have that visibility, you'll understand your multi-cloud environment. You can create a security baseline throughout your multi-cloud environment, throughout your estate. You're going to be able to derive themes and trends. You're going to have alerts and notifications that are going to be from everywhere. And it's going to give you the ability to respond faster to events, understand what happened with a lot more context and nuance. So having that visibility in one place, it's great, but we have some trade-offs, right? And that's on the next screen I'll show you. So for the recommended pattern, that's centralized logging. For the enablement, we have a security information and event management system. So this is another place where, like we talked, you may be able to expand the tooling that you already have. And if you already have expertise, it may accelerate the implementation in your multi-cloud environment. Again, who here is already using a SIEM for their incident response and monitoring? Yeah, so if you have that in place, you're already halfway there. But of course, you're going to have to take those considerations when it comes to how to implement it. So let's talk about the trade-offs first, and we'll talk about the considerations after. So the benefits that are going to be provided are real, right? You're going to have that central visibility, that one place to see everything that's going on in your environment. It's going to give you the ability to understand your environment a lot better. You're going to be able to differ normal from maybe suspicious or anomalous behavior. Is going to give you all the information you need in one place, and is going to be able to help correlate across clouds for that faster response. So if an event happens, you can respond really quickly and know if it's an incident, and then try to do any remediation you need to have. Again, the first trade-off in my mind is going to be an investment. you're going multi-cloud anyway, so a lot of this complexity is going to be audited by default. And so if you spend some time and effort in the front end, understanding what logs you need, where you need them, what visibility you really need, it's not going to be about collecting everything all in the same place, like in one database or in one lake or in one cloud. It's about whatever your decision is of where you put that data, be it central or diversified throughout your cloud estate, having one place to get all that visibility, right? So that complexity, that analysis that you're going to do on the front end is going to pay dividends in the back end, right? Because it's going to be a lot easier to respond once an incident is happening, and that's when time really counts. So cost is a true consideration here because of data and tooling, right? Like Jeff said, tooling is going to be a cost consideration. So you may have to start thinking through use cases that you need so that you know what data is ingested by your tool and you're not incurring too much cost. Data is also going to be a consideration when it comes to cost. You're going to make sure that you're not duplicating data. If you're moving data around, cost may also be an issue, right? Transferring that data around may be costly, so you have to consider that. And you may want to push data through its life cycle so that you're putting data in least costly storage systems so that you don't incur that cost that you don't need, right? Timing is going to be an important thing here because you want to respond as quickly as you can. So getting those logs ingested, aggregated, analyzed fairly quickly, almost real time so that you can react to them is going to be very important. And then of course, time sync. You may have different clouds in different time zones. So you may have different time that you have to coordinate and correlate before an incident happens, because any time skew during an investigation can throw the entire time life up, right? So it's going to make the incident response a lot harder. So those are a lot of the considerations you have to have all that visibility in place. Let's talk about the expert teams and tools that are going to help you once you have that visibility.
Every time we went over that last slide and we got to the challenge of timing, you always told me it was my horrible jokes. All right. So expert teams and tools. This is kind of an interesting one for me. Again, I have some sort of unique experience in this. I came from a large company prior to coming to AWS, and we were large enough that when we started to embrace and expand into other cloud providers for a number of reasons, we were building sub-teams, right? And the benefit of the sub-teams is that you're creating a team of dedicated experts around that cloud. And then that team becomes part of your cloud center of excellence that then is able to provide security and architecture security and architecture expertise voice to your development teams, to your leadership, whoever needs that type of input. And it also means that the management of that cloud provider is pushed down into the sub-team who knows it best, right? But I'm also keenly aware that not a lot of companies can scale at this in this way, right? This is typically more like a large enterprise type solution. I think a lot of customers are more commonly on the other side of this slide, which is the dedicated tooling, where you have security teams, you have maybe a cloud engineering team as part of your CCOE, and what you need is tooling to augment that team, tooling that can provide a lot of the inspection, monitoring, and the general well-being of your architectures and workloads in each cloud, because there are a lot of tools. We encourage you to look for ones that are cloud neutral. Or maybe it's fair to just say tools that operate in the cloud that you are trying to run workloads on. Because you don't want to run down the path of one tool for one cloud provider, one tool for another, because that doesn't really fix the problem in this particular challenge. You should also look at the tools that you already have. Customers buy a lot of tools that have features in them that don't get used simply because they don't necessarily, they don't have workloads that need them. There's a lot of tools for like configuration, security posture management, right? CSPM or the new CNAPs. A lot of customers that buy those for their AWS workload, but that tool is also, a lot of those tools are ready to go for Azure and GCP. And so look at we should be looking at tools that can just simply be extended that we already have. Question whether or not we should be buying a tool, whether we should be developing a tool, or simply looking into the open source community for tooling that can achieve what we need. And partners. There's lots of partners out there that have a lot of deep experience in this, that are ready to come and partner with you and become effectively that extension to your team in this space. So what the enablement around this is one way or another, your folks are going to need some training, or you're going to need to hire additional folks, because if you're operating in one cloud provider and you suddenly start operating in another, you're not necessarily going to have even the most like foundational expertise in that other cloud. So we're going to have to train and potentially hire to scale for that. Partner tools exist. There's a lot of them here. Out on the village floor, we should definitely be talking to them if this is a challenge that you're up against. Looking at, again, the tools that you have and can they be extended. Open source. Open source is a place where a lot of the tools come out of the box ready to operate on a number of cloud providers, because it's sort of the nature of open source that you don't want to be locked into a vendor. You don't want to be, forced to do things one way. And so the open source community, especially when you look at a lot of the services that are out there, Terraform, Terraform is really into like not being locked into one cloud provider. They want to be able to allow you to deploy and manage architecture on any cloud provider that you're running on. And cloud native services, right? So there's a lot of cloud native services that might perfectly meet or exceed your requirements, and that's great. You should always, again, be evaluating it against your security outcomes, your security requirements, and finding out, like, are there gaps? Do we need to fill something in through one of these other mechanisms? And I think the benefits here, the person scaling approach, the sub-team scaling approach, has got a tremendous amount of benefit in terms of specialized cloud expertise, but is, again, that challenge that we talked about. It has, whether or not you are deploying tools or you're bringing people in, your cloud center of excellence is going to benefit from that, because you're going to have folks and tools attached to it that are going to be able to bring expertise and additional controls or monitoring to benefit your development team. And the challenges. I think the challenges are probably pretty obvious in this one. So teams, if you have a team, if you go the team route, you can kind of get that siloed effect, right? Because if Luis here is my AWS expert, and his team just does AWS, and I'm the Azure expert, and my team just does Azure. If something happens that we need to withdraw workloads from one of those cloud providers, and we want one team or the other to begin working on the other cloud, that is going to require training. It becomes very their skills may become very siloed. So it's just a challenge to consider. It can be hard to find that expertise natively. So if you are looking to hire people into your security realm for it, I think most of us probably in the security space are aware that hiring security personnel is difficult at best right now. But then to ask for some very specific expertise can become really challenging. Complex tool deployment. Complexity kind of comes with the game when we're talking about multi-cloud, because now we have to deploy our tool over a number of different cloud providers and endpoints. And obviously management comes into play. More tools, more people means more resources required to kind of keep them all functioning smoothly. Our manager deals with Luis and I's petty arguments all the time. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, so next steps. There's a lot of help available to you. AWS has got a lot of folks internally that are ready to come talk to you about any of these challenges. Your account team knows how to find those folks like Luis and I that are dedicated security specialists that have a lot of compliance and architecture security experience. And so if you're up against one of these challenges, talk to your account team, pull in some of these resources. We can definitely provide a lot of input.
We're going to be at the Multicloud booth.
Yes, and there's a Multicloud booth out on the village floor. We'll be there tomorrow, but there's people there the whole time. Definitely come have a talk to them. It'll be security people, operations people, FinOps, a number of different expertise. So we also talk about frameworks. Again, this is really important. You might or might not be surprised the number of customers that Luis and I talk to who struggle to even define their own security policies, when great frameworks exist to really help start guiding you in this space. So be sure to check these out. I mean, these are super common, very well-known. Center for Internet Security, the NIST CSF, like we talked about earlier. Cloud Security Alliance has got a ton of stuff available to you. MITRE ATT&CK Framework is very cloud agnostic, so they really have got a lot of good information from a security perspective. ISO's got a ton of frameworks, 27K, but even in the AI and AI security space, which is emerging rapidly, they have new frameworks that have been published. FedRAMP and FISMA, if you're in that space, you already know about them. You pretty much can't operate without them. And PCI. PCI is a great one to look at, even if you are not required to be PCI compliant. They publish a ton of stuff. Lots and lots of auditors and compliance folks know how to operate around PCI, and it provides a really good framework for a lot of this security. So takeaways. Security requirements don't change. I don't care how awesome the cloud provider that your uncle runs is, but you need to apply your security policies. You need to understand your security outcomes, and you need to hold true and fast to them and evaluate anywhere that you're going to run workloads against those security policies.
Start cloud agnostic, right? Start cloud neutral and high level so that you can drive those requirements throughout. Remember to look at outcomes, not implementation, when it comes to the high level, and then look at the implementation after.
Look at extending your tools. I mean, most people, most companies already own tools that can be extended into multiple cloud providers. So if you're starting to think about this, if you've started to move that way, if you're trying to rope in like some shadow ops that are going on in other cloud providers, a lot of people already have tools that are easily deployed to begin handling that.
And finally, data matters, right? That data governance really matters, understanding where your data lives, where it's transmitted, where it's processed. Jeff talked about data protection and mechanisms, automatic mechanisms to put in place to understand where data is, but also non-technical, right? Talk to your people, understand data flows, understand what business centers are using what data so that you can understand how to protect it more efficiently.
And you might want to capture these with your phone. These are a couple of really good resources that you can explore from AWS's end. The first one is the main AWS Multicloud landing page. This has got a lot of really great information, links to other resources within AWS that can help guide a lot of this. This page is rapidly growing with content as we ourselves are beginning to publish and develop helpful content for customers in the multi-clouds. They're operating in multi-cloud space. And the other one is the blog. So just like we have a number of other blogs, like for instance, the security blog that Luis and I have published on, Multicloud has a blog that is going, that content is being developed fairly quickly. So definitely check it out. And from Luis and I, we super appreciate you taking the time to be here and listen to us. And we'd love feedback. So when you evaluate the session here, please let us know what you think, how we can develop this better for you. And after this, we'll be right back there, and we're happy to talk to anybody that wants to follow up on this. So thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your week.